Hello and good morning. Thank you all for joining us today. Let's get started, shall we? We have a great session for you today, all about leveraging platform capabilities for a smoother upgrade. This safe harbor notice is here just to remind you that some of this presentation may contain forward-looking statements and to not make any purchasing decisions based on those forward-looking statements. My name is Shmail Al-Dasri. I support upgrades here at ServiceNow, and I'm very lucky today to be joined by Adam Stout, Director of Outbound Product Management for the ServiceNow Platform. We've got a full agenda for you today. We will cover the ServiceNow upgrade policy. We will go over the platform capabilities that you can leverage in your upgrade, so ATF, Instant Scan, upgrade plans. Adam has got some really great demos for us today. We'll wrap up with some resources and tools that you can start using today, and we've saved some time here at the end for Q&A. During today's session, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box or in the chat. I'd love to start our webinars off with a poll question. I'm wondering, what release version are you on? I'm curious to know if anyone's already on Utah. If anyone is on a version earlier than Rome, I dare you to expose yourself in the chat. Thank you for your feedback. I'll just give it a couple more seconds here. Alrighty. Okay, so it looks like we've got most of the folks here today are on Tokyo. We've got some people on San Diego. We've got one person here who's on Rome. And then we've already got some people here who are on Utah, so that's great. So let's discuss the ServiceNow upgrade policy. There are 2 times a year, there are family releases. Depending on your support entitlement, you are due for an upgrade at least once a year. So if you look at the box here below, for our customers that are on the San Diego release with an N-2 support entitlement, you are due for an upgrade in September to the Utah or Vancouver release. For our customers who are on the Tokyo release, which from our poll, it looks like most of you are on the Tokyo release. If you have N-1 entitlement, you are due for an upgrade in September as well. If you have any questions on, what support entitlement you're on, you can find this information right in your Now support portal or by reaching out to your ex. Got another poll question here. Are you planning to upgrade to the Utah release? I know we've already got some folks who've already upgraded. Thank you for your participation. Alrighty, well, no surprise, most of you are planning to upgrade, which is probably why you joined our webinar today. So I think a lot of the information that we'll be sharing will be really valuable to you. So here at ServiceNow, we encourage our customers to stay current with each of the release. Not only do you get the latest in platform and security enhancements, you also get to access new products and features from the latest release. Additionally, you keep your access to 24/7, 365 support, which includes support with specific upgrade patches and hot fixes. For more information regarding the support entitlement, please visit the Impact Resource Center, which should be linked in the chat for you. Okay, I've got a third poll question. Alrighty. When are you planning to perform your next upgrade? In the next month, in the next 2 months, next 2 to 4 months, 4 to 6 months, in the next 6 months? Maybe we've got some early birds here, or maybe you just don't know yet. This is really good feedback for us. Thank you all. Wonderful. Okay. It looks like most of you are planning to upgrade in the next month or in the next 2 months. That's great. Okay, well, that is all for me for now. So I'll pass it on to Adam to walk us through some of the platform capabilities you can use for a smoother upgrade.
Great. Thanks, Shimon. Let me take over sharing.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk about some of the applications that we have access to that are going to help our upgrades. I should put a little bit more filler in here, but I do have one more poll to go through about ATF. So we are going to talk about the automated test framework. And as I start talking about it, if we can launch this poll about what are you doing now for testing. So we're going to talk about automated testing, but I am curious today if you are using what type of testing you're doing today. Is it just manual? Are you using ATF today? Are you using some automated testing that's not ATF? There's lots of other options out there. Or if it's your first upgrade and we haven't gotten through it yet. So we're seeing lots of manual testing, lots of great ATF testing and some other testing as well. I think I can go on to another slide while we still have this open. We'll leave it open for another moment. We're going to talk today about ServiceNow's automated test framework. This is what it looks like to come through. Every instance has this part of the platform. No additional charge to use ATF to come through. And what this allows us to do is to get rid of manual testing or to augment manual testing. There'll probably still be some manual testing that we're doing, but what we're able to do is take our test scripts, what testing we do, and document those as steps in an ATF test and run that over and over again. I'll go ahead and end the poll. So right now we are seeing lots of people doing manual testing, some ATF use, and that's basically the majority is either manual testing or using ATF. We have something in here for all of you to come through. With ATF, again, we can take those test steps that I have to ask users to do, and I'm going to record them as part of as an automated test so I can run them over and over again. And what that allows us to do is to get rid of to shrink the time we have to test from an upgrade. When we upgrade, rather than upgrading one of my subprods, sending out an email, coordinating all the testing it needs to do, I can just run the automated test framework. And more importantly, rather than just testing when we're doing the upgrade, I can do this every week. I can do this with every change I'm deploying. We can at virtually no cost run these tests over and over again and find those problems earlier. One of the things that I like to look at for upgrades is that I don't upgrade once a year or twice a year or 4 times a year. I upgrade every day. Every time I'm making a change, I'm making my upgrade easier or harder. And using ATF allows us to make it easier as we go through. So with ATF, there's 3 main use cases when we're using ATF or what we're looking for. So one is functional testing of business logic. So this is as I'm developing new enhancements, I'm changing some configuration, I'm updating a flow, I'm adding a new process. I'm able to run my ATF at that point in time to validate that I get what I want to, that it's doing what I want it to do. I get the results that I'm looking for. The next we have is browser compatibility testing. And browser compatibility testing, this is important for some of our orgs that we support Safari and Edge, but not Chrome, or support Chrome and Edge, but nothing else. Or specifically where we see lots of organizations that have a very specific set of plugins that are extensions in those browsers. ServiceNow can test for what we know exists, but we can't test for what we don't know exists. We can't test for perhaps some of your customized extensions for those browsers. With browser compatibility testing in ATF, you can run these tests, these automated tests in your browser. So I'm able to, again, document everything that I want to have tested. I'm going to take my manual tests and I'm going to document those as test steps, create tests and test suites, and then I can run them in my browser. I will bring up my Safari, I will bring up my Edge, my Chrome, and run all of those tests. And then I can bring up Safari and Chrome at the same time, run those as well. And I can make sure that everything works the way I want it to work in the browser that I need it to do. So really important to allow you to be able to do that. And then the third use case, which we'll talk a lot about today, about regression testing. And regression testing allow us to understand, is there a change in behavior between before and after an upgrade? So the functional testing, I'm testing as I'm developing, I'm testing new behavior. Do I get the outcome I want? Browser compatibility testing allows me to test my browsers and to make sure that they're not introducing any issues kind of out of the norm. And then we can handle those, whether we're updating an extension or we're a browser version, or we're updating the client script that needs to run. And then regression testing is just flat out letting me go, this is how it worked before my upgrade. I upgrade, this is how it works after. And that it's not always bad when we see failures, and we'll see in ATF, we do call it pass and fail, but it's allowing me to identify changes in behavior. Some are good, some are bad. When we upgrade, we are changing behaviors. Sometimes we're fixing an issue. We're adding new logic that will result in a change of behavior. Sometimes it's something unexpected. In any case, those regression tests are going to tell us these are things we need to identify. And by using ATF, I don't have to rely on my testers to have time available to do it. I don't have to pay people to test, and I don't have to worry about them doing it wrong. By using ATF, I'm ensuring that it happens when I press a button, and then it happens the exact same way every time. As we get into ATF, a couple of key things that I want everybody to remember. The first one is make a plan. When we want to work with ATF, it's really, really important we have a plan on what we want to do. We can't just go, hey, I want to run ATF. I want to understand how detailed my testing is it going to be, how in depth am I going to be, so we're all on the same page throughout my organization about what we're testing, what we're not testing. I want to know how we're going to maintain the tests. It's really important as we get started in ATF to have a plan of how we're going to maintain these tests. So if I just determine that there's an issue in behavior that's changed, who is going to determine this is the behavior we do want or behavior we don't want? If it is what we want, we have to go update those tests. Who's going to do that? It's not something you can just set and forget. We do need to have a plan of when something happens, who is going to take responsibility for it, so we're not scrambling at that point in time. As we go through, there's a couple other bullets here, but we just want to make sure we plan. We know who is going to resolve those tests, how we're going to maintain those tests, when we're going to run those tests, how detailed they're going to be. Next one is keeping it simple. In ATF, we don't need to test every possible permutation of what's coming out. A human needs to create these tests, and we want to make sure we're identifying the lowest, smallest thing we can identify. And we want to test just to make sure it works. Does the flow firing? Do I get the right result? I do not need to test, is every field show up? Because it doesn't really matter. It's not a big issue. I don't have to test what ServiceNow ships. What I need to test is the customizations that I've made, and particularly if I'm adding new business rules, new flows, new logic in there, new fields, new required fields. We want to make sure that those things that we have changed, that's what we're testing. We just don't need to test everything else. Make sure we're going through that. Keep in mind execution time. In ATF, we can test via the UI, or we can test via the server side. The server side is always faster, but it depends what you're testing, what you want to do. So if I want to set something up, I'm probably going to do it server side. I'm going to create a record. I'm going to create a user. Just going to do that server side. It's done sub-second. If I'm testing the UI, which is if I'm doing browser compatibility testing, I'm testing in the UI. We want to make sure that we use the UI side for that. It's important to think about it. I can do virtually everything on the UI side, but it takes longer. And we have to make sure that the pages render and everything is downloaded and there's not a network issue that's causing a failure. So it's important, again, to think about what's going on, optimize for test speed. If I can do it on the server, let's do it on the server. And if I'm testing the UI, test on the UI. If I'm not testing the UI, then don't test in the UI. You make sure you use the server side. They're all right next to each other. There's nothing major about that, but it's, again, just thinking about what are we trying to test and make sure we're testing that. That falls in line with keeping it simple. The last piece of this is we're going to make sure we're testing for outcomes and configuration. This goes hand in hand with keeping it simple. But again, what do I want it to do? And does it do that? Then we're good. I don't need to test every possible iteration of what comes in. I don't need to test, check for all the different priorities. If I'm looking, does the dropdown have all 4 priorities? Was that what you're testing? Yes, then do that. If you're not testing that, then don't do that. If I'm just testing that, does it get routed appropriately? is the resolution code required before I close it. Test those things. We want to have nice, small, fast tests that will identify quickly what's going on. The longer my test gets, the actual test, the longer it takes to execute, but also the longer it takes to debug, to understand, to identify ownership, because there's so many moving parts. So we want to make sure that we have just the pieces we're going to test. So when there's an error, we know very clearly and concisely who needs to look at it and what do I need to do. And next, one piece about ATF on the way it works. The test suites. So with ATF, we have test steps that are pieces: creating a user, inserting a record, clicking on a button. Those are all those test steps. Those are put together into tests, and then those tests are put together in test suites. And this is really useful again to understand what's happening, and how things roll out. So I'm going to have my test steps. We ship many test steps out of the box. You can also create custom test steps, which are really useful for complex setups, or just things we do really repeatedly. So we have our test steps. We'll put those together. We're going to put them in a test. Inside of each test, we will roll back when we're complete. So I'm going to say I want to do these 5 steps, these 10 steps, these 20 steps. When that's done, it's going to roll back all of those transactions and not leave a lot of gunk around. So one of the things I want to call out on this slide as we go through, when I'm creating tests, a lot of the things I'll do first is to create a user. I'm going to create a user. I'm going to give it some roles. I'm not going to reuse users that are out there, because that's going to cause me some problems at some point in time down the line. A user changes department and now my test breaks. That's not something that I want to have to deal with. What we want to make sure that we're handling is that I'm going to create a user, and the user is going to have this custom role. So I know this user's there. I know they're active. I know who their manager is. I know what groups they're in. I'm going to give them the roles that they want to have, and they're going to do this one specific thing. And we just don't have to worry about different things going through. So if I'm trying to test a category or a group or something, I'll probably create that as well, unless it's something very specific to come through. We'll create all the stuff, we roll back. So that way I don't have to worry about, does this incident already exist? It doesn't matter. If there's a duplicate thing, it doesn't matter, because I'm going to create it, it'll roll it back. Inside of each test, we can pass data along. So I'm going to create a user. To the next test step, I'm going to pass, what was that user's ID? It's going to create an incident. To the next step, I'm going to pass what the incident ID is, so that I can move everything back. Again, I roll back, all that stuff goes away. I can move past that data inside of a test, but it's only within inside of a test because it gets rolled back. But I'll put all those tests together. It's part of a test suite, and test suites can be nested as well. So I'm going to have a test suite that says test everything. I'm going to have a test suite inside of that, which is test all of ITSM. Inside of that, I'm going to have a test suite that says just test incident. Inside of that, I might have one that says test P1 incidents, or test user experience for incidents versus backend business rules. As I'm developing enhancements, I'm making some changes, I can just run a test suite, one of the smaller test suites, just test incident. That's all we're changing. Or I can run the full suite. I can even go down and just say, I want to run this one test as I'm going through. I want to encourage my developers to be running these tests as they're developing. I definitely want to be testing them as I'm moving through every change that goes through. And then what we're talking about today with upgrades, when I'm going through my major upgrades, I'm going to run all my tests that I can come through. But again, don't just run ATF twice a year. Let's run it every week. And so that we always have these small changes to come through. We have nice, simple, fast tests. We can run them every night. We can run them as we're developing. We just don't have surprises when we come to upgrades. Nobody wants a surprise when we get to the upgrade. And the other note that I'll put in here, as we're running these tests, we're generally going to create a user and impersonate. ATF will handle that impersonation to come through, so that these tests do run as those users. And particularly when we get into the UI, we want to understand what's going on. So as I create tests, I'm going to create tests for my fulfillers, but for different end users as well with those roles, to make sure that everybody is getting the right experience. I might test the incident form multiple ways: as an end user, as a manager, as a business stakeholder, as a fulfiller. ATF lets us do all of those things without me having to engage with each of those people. If I'm doing manual testing, either I have to manually impersonate them, or I have to ask somebody from marketing to come do some testing. I need to ask some of my fulfillers to take time off from doing real work to do this testing. ATF allows me to simplify that. I'm still going to use my users for acceptance testing to make sure they like it. All I want them to do is assess, do you like this or do you not like this? And do we need to address that? Not does it work? ATF allows us to take out that question of does it work? And a couple other tips that come through. We talked about these a little bit, but one, creating custom step configurations. Don't be afraid to do that. We want to use the out-of-the-box ones. We have a lot of the out-of-the-box ones to insert a record, create a user, click on a button, read a field. But we can create new ones, and particularly for test setups is where I'll use custom tests, custom step configurations. If you're using, especially with some custom apps, and we want to create some things to come through, don't be afraid to use a custom step configuration. Look what's out there, use what you can, and then if it makes it simpler, it makes it easier, use a custom step configuration. And again, the custom step configurations allows us to put whatever scripting we want in as well. There is a run server-side script test step configuration where you can just paste in a script. But if I'm going to reuse it, let's make it more reusable by making it a custom step configuration. The run server-side script step, the out-of-the-box one, just by itself is something where I'm just going to do a one-off. I need to do this one little thing one time. Outside of that, we're going to promote it to being step configurations. And I call this out because if you use the run server-side script by itself all the time, you're going to end up with just a bunch of mess of script around, hard to maintain. And particularly as I go through an upgrade, maybe there's a change in behavior. If I have it as a step configuration, it's reusable, it's compartmentalized. I can come in and update that one custom step configuration because maybe something behaves differently between San Diego and Utah. I update one place, all my tests work again without having to go through every test individually. Create a user and impersonate. Again, reusing is useful in some use cases, but generally we want to make sure that everything can be tested in isolation. So I'm going to create a user and impersonate that user with just the role I want. So I don't have to worry about a user leaving, changing roles, group management changing. I don't have to worry about all that because I'm creating and impersonating. The note here about updating. If you update a record, updating always works. So make sure you validate that the record did do what you want it to do. That's how we test. That's how we test flows, how we test business rules. We update a record and then we validate, we query that record and validate, is it giving me the right results? Is it now what I expect? And then the record query, really useful when I query a record because then I can start passing those variables to everything else. So I do want my tests to be somewhat dynamic, but particularly with the users and with users that we want to create those users and roles because that does change quite often. All right, the last piece I want to say for those, specifically for those using ATF already, and for those of you who aren't, this one slide is going to make this hour really useful for you, really valuable for us. And that's about the ATF test generator and Cloud Runner. And we are going to do a demo of this next, my favorite demo I ever do here. And the ATF test generator and Cloud Runner, this is a store app. So you're going to have to go to the ServiceNow store to opt in for this and then install it on your instance. This is compatible with Tokyo. I have this up in a second. I think it's going to be patch 4, but you do need to be on Tokyo to get this. If you're on San Diego, you're not going to be able to use this yet. But if you're on Tokyo, you should get this, and then going forward, you can. Test Generator and Cloud Runner, it's two different things, one app. The first is generating tests, and this generates regression tests for us. So I talked about keeping it simple before. That's true when a human's creating it. But if I have a computer generating it for me, then I don't really care. And what the test generator is going to do is it's going to look at your data and it's going to create tests to fingerprint what your instance looks like right now. We're going to fingerprint what our instance looks like right now before my upgrade. I'm then going to upgrade and then I'll run the tests. I'll run those tests again to identify if there's any changes in behavior. So when we run this operationally, what we're going to do is we're going to take a subprod. We're going to clone from prod to subprod. It's really important that we have a fresh clone because we need data. If there's no data or we have test data, then our tests aren't going to be useful for us or anywhere near as useful as if we have real data. So we're going to clone down. I'm going to run the test generator. It's going to look at my tables, my scopes, whatever I want it to look at, or everything. And it's going to fingerprint, look at my recent data, generate what does my system look like today. Again, I'll do that upgrade and I'll run it again. It's not going to tell me are things good or bad, but it will tell me these things behave differently. These behave differently before and after the upgrade. And then a human's going to have to look at that to understand, is that what I want or not, or what I don't want? And again, that might be, hey, yeah, this fixed an issue that we had. Awesome. Or this field's required now and it wasn't required before, but this is better. Awesome. Or this doesn't work right, and we need to fix the code before we deploy it. This can generate thousands and thousands of tests for you, saving you lots of hours. We don't have to have a human go through and generate all this stuff. This is going to complement everything else we already do. It's not going to replace it. It's going to complement and give me that extra blanket of everything that goes through. It does not replace the functional testing that I created, that we talked about, and it doesn't replace using quick start tests. And we didn't talk a lot about these before, but with all the out-of-the-box solutions, we provide tests to get you started that will test out-of-the-box material, how things work out of the box. I know for Change, there are 31 out-of-the-box quick start tests. Each one of those you can run you can run to go, this is how it works out of the box. Everybody's made some changes, so they may or may not work out of the box, but you'll copy them, modify them, and it's going to help understand this is what the desired behavior is. So whether you're creating the desired behavior is, we're using the quick start test to identify the desired behavior. Those are awesome to test the business functionality, and then regression test generator is going to save you hours and hours and hours and give you a lot more confidence. For only testing manually, you probably don't have this level of confidence. This is going to boost that confidence and make your upgrade smoother. If you're using ATF, this is going to boost your confidence as well, but it's also just going to save you an amazing amount of time. The other feature that we have on here is Cloud Runner. Cloud Runner is awesome because it allows us to run these tests in the cloud. Before this, if I'm running a UI test, I have to have a client runner running. So if I'm running a UI test, it's going to actually run on my laptop. It will create users, impersonate, all that stuff, but it is running on my laptop to interact with the server. With Cloud Runner, we can have this just run in the ServiceNow cloud, and you don't have to worry about it. You could do this before, for those of you who aren't on Tokyo yet, with our headless browser, but you had to set up a Docker image. You had to provide a server for it. You had to create a Docker image. You could get basically the same functionality. Once we got into Tokyo and Cloud Runner, you don't have to worry about it. We'll host it for you and run those for you. Awesome time savings, allows us to fully automate everything. So not only is the test running automatically, but I can just schedule it to run every night and I'll get those results back. Test Generator and Cloud Runner, again, they're the same app. They run independently. You don't have to generate tests to use Cloud Runner. Cloud Runner will run however you want it to, or any test you've created, whether it is a test you created manually, whether it's a UI test, server test, whether it's from a quick start test, or whether it's test generation. Cloud Runner runs those all. If I am generating tests, these are generating ATF tests that you can go manually update as you want. So again, very independent, but they're both great features that come with the Cloud Runner in Tokyo. All right, and now I want to do a quick demo for us of Cloud Runner. So I am going to switch what I'm sharing. All right, so we are in an instance. This is actually Utah, but again, this will work back to Tokyo. I'm going to go back to the ServiceNow store. So to get this is not on your instances by default. You need to come into the ServiceNow store. Luckily, I work for ServiceNow, so I've already purchased this. This is free. It's part of the platform, but you do have to come to the store and opt in to get it to agree to the terms and conditions for it. Then you'll get it. And again, this is compatible with Utah and Tokyo patch 5. Might have said patch 4 before, but the latest version is patch 5. This version did come out in May. It came out last month to come through. A couple small enhancements in here. Release notes are here. If you're on patch 4, not patch 5. Oh, I guess the old version was in patch 2, but you want to be on patch 5 to get everything we need to get from here. Well, see the release notes that are there. Come here, opt in, then you go to your instance and install it. You're going to install this on your subprods. Once we're there, once we have this installed, I'm going to type in automated test. I've already done that. There is a one-time setup on the instance to select a cloud user. So I'm going to come in, and hopefully I haven't timed out while I was doing all my talking. I'm going to select the cloud user, and the cloud user is, I am going to put a user in that has admin access. I actually did just pick admin. What we recommend for this is that you're going to create a system user with no password, or we'll come in, just type in some gibberish for a password. Nobody needs to know the password, and then give that user admin. This user is going to be used to generate your tests. So we do need a user here. It needs to have admin access. but it doesn't actually have to be system admin. And again, nobody's going to log in. Nobody needs to know the password. There's certificate-based authentication to do all this, but we do need to have a user to figure out which data we have access to. So I'm going to set this up one time and submit it. Again, one time per setup, and then I'm going to go generate tests. So I'm going to come down in ATF down at the bottom, test generator. This is the entire form. I love this. All you're going to do is put an email address in and say generate tests. And not have to do that. Here we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're going to generate, wherever generate tests. It is opening in a window I think you can't see. So I am going to. There we go. Shemail, if you want to confirm that we can see this. Okay, so I'm hoping that we can all see the generate tests. We have a form in here. We're going to type an email in. That's all we need to have. Now, as a note, on subprods, I generally have email turned off. This will bypass those restrictions and it will send an email out. This is because this is designed to run on a subprod. It is designed to send me a notification when this is done. This bypasses the normal email system, so it will send an email out even if you have email disabled on that instance. And all we have to do is click submit, and it's going to generate tests. It's all you have to do. I'm going to go in advanced, so we're going to take a look at what's in here. We have a few options. So we can generate for everything, which is the default all scopes, all tables. I can also come in and select a specific scope. So if I want to just generate something for, this may not have anything in here, but I could generate just for a specific scope. This is great for my custom development because I can generate my tests for those scopes. I'm going to say all scopes. You can also choose a table. If you want to test just a specific table, you can select that table. How many tests? So this is set to create 10,000 tests or less, 9,999 tests, and no more than 50 tests per table. That's going to be thorough enough and send my email. So I'm going to actually uncheck that. I just want to create everything, and I'm going to click submit. Generating tests can take several hours up to a few days to generate. The latest update did have some performance improvements in there, but it still will take some time. Don't expect this to happen within minutes. It will take hours and possibly days. It's going to be doing a lot of analysis on your data. If I'm just generating for one table, it'll probably be pretty quick. But if I'm generating for thousands of tables on my instance, it's got a lot of work to do to profile what you have, to generate those tests, and to validate those tests work correctly. When we generate tests, so it does take some time, but I like to think of these tests as disposable tests. They're not things we're going to keep forever. So the quick start tests I modify, the tests I create manually, those I'm going to keep and run and maintain. Generated tests are, I'm going to clone to a subprod, generate my tests, run them for that upgrade, and then I'll probably throw them away. I'll probably delete them. I might keep them for a little bit of time, but they are all based off the actual data, and they will get stale and deviate as we make other changes coming through. There's no cost to generate tests. It's just some time. So it's something we need to plan for. If I'm going through my upgrade, probably in my upgrade cycle, I'm going to generate my tests and keep those for a few weeks. We need to plan for that time. So again, not expected to be minutes, but to hours and to up to a couple days. But there's no real cost, right? I just have to press a button and be gone for the weekend and I'll have them. So make sure that you're not afraid to regenerate those tests. We're going to go look at the tests that are generated. A question came in about performance. So you shouldn't notice it as it's going on. It's only using one semaphore. So it's one user who's looking at a lot of data, but you shouldn't notice it. Again, this is going to be on a subprod to come through. It is working, but it's not going to be really anything you notice. When we run tests in ATF as well, it's like a user's doing it. So if I'm running one session, it shouldn't impact anything. It's working. It takes time, but again, it's controlled. So you're not really going to notice anything. You certainly can do other testing that's going on while I'm generating. You could do other testing on your test instance. It's not going to bog it down completely, but it is doing some crunching in the background. All right, so my tests that have been generated, we're going to go pull them up. They're going to be named ATF generated suite, And as we come through, in this case, I do only have test data, so my tests are not going to be good. But as I come through, let's look at this assessment category results. Super interesting because I don't even know what's in there, but it looked at my data and it created a bunch of things. Now, when I create my tests manually, we talked about this a lot. I'm going to create users and impersonate because this is looking at real data. It's always using real user. It's never going to create a user to come through. And I'm going to switch to global. And so what we have in here is I have my test. It generated the test with the table name and the user and the view it's looking at. It's going to impersonate that, open the form. It's going to make sure things work, everything loads. It's going to set some values and go through. And again, this is all going to be UI based, or the vast majority will be UI based. So it's got some timeout checks that come through. It's going to make sure everything works. Very detailed. This only has 8 steps, so we can get to a more interesting one. 8's not a bad number if I was manually creating it. But if I'm going to go look at incident, you will see some tests that are generated that are hundreds of steps to come through, because it is going to test everything it can as it looks through, and you can see a level of detail. If I'm manually creating this, there's no way I'm going to go to this level of detail. I'm going to check what's there, what's really important to me, and not all of these things are really, really important. But when I have the generator do it, it's going to test everything. Why not? Right? Again, we want to fingerprint what the system looks like before and after those upgrades. So lots and lots of details. It's checking, is everything there, and going through. Again, I didn't have to do any of this. It just generated it for me. And I want to pull up quickly what the Cloud Runner looks like and what you have to do for that. So we do have to set up that cloud user, which we already did for the test generator. And if I'm going to run the test, all I have to do is say, I want to run it in the Cloud Runner. So I have a choice. Do I want to start a test runner, which is local? If I'm doing cross-browser testing, I'm going to be using a local test runner. This is what I was able to do before. You're able to do this in San Diego. Once we got to Tokyo, we'll have Cloud Runner. You do have to install this to work. I think if you don't have it installed, it'll actually give you the option and say, you want to go install it. But once we have this installed, we can click Cloud Runner and we'll click Run Test. And then it's just going to go run it in the cloud. It actually looks the same in this interface, whether I have a local test runner running or it has the cloud. I don't know if this is actually connected right now to do it. It's trying to connect into the Cloud Runner, run those tests, and give me the results. The results also are stored the same. There's no difference. It's just, did I run it locally, or did I run it locally? Did somebody else run it locally? Did it run in the cloud? You'll be able to review those results and those test results. I'm actually going to cancel this right now, but that'll run through. For those of you who haven't seen ATF, we're actually going to run this locally too. So I'm going to come in and click Run Test. Come through. We're going to run test, and I'm going to start a new test runner. So I'm going to run this locally. It's going to open up a new tab, and it's going to run those tests for me. And we're actually going to see it run. As it's going, you'll see it coming in, running doing the test step, waiting, making sure everything loads through, and it's going to be taking screenshots as we're going to. There's an option whether you want to keep those screenshots for everything, or you just want to keep those screenshots when there's failures. I think the default is only when there's failures. That's what I do. So if everything works fine, it just says it's passed and I'm good. But if it doesn't look right, if it doesn't pass, it's going to take a screenshot so I can review the failures, go, that's what went wrong, and then go from there. And then I can, again, decide that's what I want, that's not what I want. So it's going through right now. It's running those steps. If we come back to the other tab, this is what we'll see with Cloud Runner as well. It's running these things in the background as it's going through. When tests are running, if you're running them locally, don't do anything else on the instance from this session, because this session is what's going to roll back. So if you did something, it actually would get rolled back as part of the test. It doesn't know what's part of the test and what's not. It knows the test is going on. When it's done with the test, it rolls back. If I'm doing this in Cloud Runner, that's fine. I can do other things. If I have it in a different browser, it's fine too. But this session is part of the test. So this is running. It's running through everything it needs to go through. And you'll see it mixing server side, UI side, and server side. It knows the difference, so we can optimize those things. And I'm going back here. It's running those steps to come back. I can watch it run, but again, I don't need to. And let's look here. So it went through the UI side. We came back to the server side. And if you can see the difference, it took a minute to run 10 server side or client side UI steps. And then server side, it did 20 more of those in a second. There is a big difference to come through. And then we did that rollback. We'll go to the results. And what we're seeing is this is everything I wanted to do, and it successfully did all of these things. If I had a failure, it would tell me where it failed and stop, and I can go drill into what's going on, allow me to recreate it. With the test regression steps, it's good. We do expect these all to pass. If I'm testing specific functionality, again, the simpler it is, the more I know who should go look at it and where that issue is. All right. So we went through the test, we went through the demo, we went through it there. And let's go back to the deck. I'm going to take a second to answer some questions. All right, so a couple questions that came in general, having to do with ATF. Okay, so we have where do you build ATF and where do you run ATF? So we're going to build and run ATF on our subprods. An important note though, with those tests that we create, I'm generally going to promote those to production, and they're going to go with the app that it's going with. So I want my tests to go to production. I'm going to build them just like I build any. If I build a business rule, I'm going to build a test that goes along with it. I'm going to promote all of that through the app repo into production, and that way, when I clone, I still have my tests. When I run tests, there is a system property on the instance which says, "Can I run tests in production, or can I run tests here?" The default in production is that you do not run ATF tests. The system will just not let them run. Once we get into a subprod, we'll let them run. So you only want to run ATF tests on a subprod. Again, that rollback could be bad in production. So we want to make sure that we're testing in a subprod, but we are going to move those tests up. The same thing with the store app. You can install the store app in prod. That's fine, but we're not going to generate tests in prod. We're probably not going to do that. We're doing the clone and generate them there. So the tests that I build, the quick start tests that I modified, those will go into prod. The generated tests probably won't go to prod because I'm going to generate them and throw them away when I'm done. But we're going to always run in a subprod. When should you not use ATFs? If ATF doesn't test what you're looking for, then you're going to use something else. ATF doesn't do mobile. ATF right now doesn't do configurable workspaces, so we need to use something else to help test that. But anything I can use ATF for, I want to. It's free, it's easy. We want to get through that. And the last piece that I talk with ATF, people ask me, how do I get started with ATF? And the way you get started with ATF is you just get started. You write a test. We start from now going forward. I don't worry about my test coverage going backwards, but if I start every change I'm starting to put in, I'm going to start with my tests. We're going to use the test generator and start getting used to running it and creating those regression tests and running them and generating them and running them and generating them. And those business use cases, I'm going to use quick start tests for the stuff that's out of the box and get started there. Like the name says, very quickly. And every time I make a change, I'm going to start requiring ATF tests. Customers that are successful with ATF have part of their definition of done, or part of their acceptance of a story is that you have an ATF test. The test doesn't work and it does not work. Start building out your library. It will take some time, but you're going to sleep better. Upgrades are going to be easier as we go forward. Couple other quick things before Shmail tells me that I'm running over. It does not need to be system admin as your cloud user, but it does need to have admin access. The reinstalling, if you install in prod, then when you clone, you won't have to worry about it, or you can reinstall it as it goes through. And customizations, really important one for the test generation. The test generator doesn't know what's custom and what's not. It just is going to look at fields and look at your data and figure it out. So whether it's customized or out of the box, it doesn't matter. It doesn't know. I don't have an option to say, don't test customizations. It's going to test them. If you have those fields, you have it on your forms, you have data in there, it's going to test it. And as far as time that's generating for all scopes, for everything, it's all dependent on how much data you have, because it's the generator has to look at your data and profile it to figure out what the common values are on what we should test. So limiting the total number of tests, the default is 10,000 and 50 tests per table. It will stop there, but you could adjust those down, or you could adjust them up as you want to. and how much time. Again, we have some performance improvements that came out in May, but do expect hours to a couple of days. But it will be very, very much data dependent. Okay, I'm going to rapidly talk about some other, more rapidly than I normally talk about some other things. Getting started with ATF in the community. There is a there's a Getting Started with ATF Center of Expertise in here, has links to several webinars that talk about ATF in a lot more detail. How do I get started? What are my best practices? And then a lot of resources, now learning, training, some labs from Knowledge. Lots of great content in here. A lot of great place to ask questions, that's in the chat as well. Other piece I want to talk about was Instant Scan. And I think I have about 2 minutes to do this. So Instant Scan is a great complement to ATF. So it's going to identify issues in your configuration, errant patterns that come through. It's going to help you enforce best practices. You can write your own checks for Instant Scan to make sure that your developers are writing code to meet your standards. And it's going to allow you to uphold those quality standards as we go forward. We're going to go through things. Let's see if I have the example here. I'm going to actually go through this a little bit faster. But again, there's a lot of out-of-the-box checks that come out of there. Instant Security Center uses this. It's going to check for things that you want it to be. So whether I'm writing a table query, I'm running a script, it's going to make sure that every bit of code that you're releasing meets your standards and meets the best standards that we have out there. And what this allows us to do is to validate. So we all develop already. So there's plenty of things to help us develop. We talked about ATF and how to test, does it work? But this allows us to validate with a static code analysis about, are things working? So if I want to look for, there's no, the old one we used to have no package calls in a script, or I want to make sure that ACLs don't have glide record in them. I can create a check that says, well, anything on sys-security ACL does not have the string glide record in it. Whatever I want to look for. Lots and lots of examples here that you can go through and make sure that best practices for ServiceNow and best practices for you are followed. We might have different sets for Instant Scan suites that are run for general health. We have one that's set for security. If you get the Instant Troubleshooter from support, that from the store, that uses Instant Scan as well. And again, you can do it. If you have App Engine, you have App Engine Studio, when you go through the deployment process, it's actually going to run an Instant Scan check that you can inject your Instant Scan checks in there. Lots of great content in here, not to test does it work, but to go, is it configured correctly? Is it meeting my best practices? And as an example, this is one that comes through where I'm looking for that does my scoped app contain any task extensions? It's something I really want to be aware of that we have some additional scrutiny for. This is out of the box. It's part of one of the ones that the pipeline works for AES, but it's doing a very simple check, looking at this table, does this exist, and flagging those things. And then what we see over here is it's not just saying, hey, this happened, or a count of these things. It's going to give you those specific records. So as an admin, I want to make sure I'm running Instant Scan before deployment to go, is everything up to my standards? And if not, I'm going to go manually look at it. It's going to tell me the specific records and the specific issue I need to go look for. I don't want to do manual code reviews. I want to use Instant Scan to do those code reviews for me as much as possible. We can run through this, look at those, look at any issues we have, and then go from there. Awesome asset, something we definitely want to leverage. An AES audit, when you go through deployment, is automatically going to write ATF and Instant Scan. Make sure we're configuring those, putting in the right tests, putting in the right Instant Scan checks for us to make sure that we can sleep easy at night. And again, every time I'm doing this deployment, I'm either going to make my upgrade easier or harder. Let's make it easier. Instant Scan and ATF are going to help us do that. Last piece is upgrade plans. Upgrade plans came out in Tokyo. So if you're in Tokyo and you're going to Utah, you can do this. The upgrade plans themselves, very simple. That comes through. I'm not doing a demo because you need 2 instances to do it. But in the past, as an admin, when I'm doing my upgrade, I would go through, figure out my scripts, figure out all the manual steps I want to do. Now I'm able to use an upgrade plan. So on the first instance I upgrade, I'm going to create an upgrade plan. It's going to be my builder. And I'm going to say, these are the skips I want. This is what I want to do. I take that, creates an app, pushes it into the app repo, and then I can apply that to all my sub prods all the way up to prod and test is everything going well. And it gets rid of a lot of the human chance for screwing things up. It makes it simply faster to do and reduces error. Upgrade plans are awesome. So again, if you're on Tokyo, take a look using an upgrade plan to help you go to Utah. It works great for major upgrades, but also if I'm doing mine along the way, we're able to push things through. A question came in about app repo. So it uses app repo by default. I don't know if you can just apply as an update set. I think it does need to use app repo. But I will have to go look there. We can look in the docs to see if you can use it without the app repo. The default is to do app repo because it's just really easy to push things through. And as far as upgrade plans go, I'll get my plug in a second to come through more detail about using them. I believe we have an academy session on it, and there is information in the documentation. With that, actually, Shamail's going to talk about it for me about the academies. I'm going to hand it back over to Shamail to give us a bunch more resources about what we're talking about, what we talked about today, and some other things to help you in your next upgrade.
Thank you, Adam. All righty. I'm going to go through this pretty quick because we're almost at time, and I want to make sure that we can answer some of your questions. And Adam will be in the chat answering some of those as I go through these resources. First and foremost, I want to make sure you know about the Utah Release Upgrade Kit. This is available on the Customer Success Center. There's going to be a link in the chat. The Upgrade Kit will give you a full summary of all of the latest innovations from the release, as well as a playlist of valuable links, demos, blogs, and all the resources that you need for your next upgrade. And what I love about the Upgrade Kit is it's available in both PDF and PowerPoint, so you can customize the presentation when delivering to your stakeholders. I also want to make sure you know about the Now Create Upgrade methodology. This gives you step-by-step guidance on upgrading your instance. You can use this. If you already have an upgrade plan, you can cross-reference this with your current plan. Each stage has an in-depth list of resources, demos, etc. Lastly, I want to make sure you know about the ServiceNow Upgrades and Releases Community Forum. This is a place to ask questions and get answers, not only from ServiceNow experts, but from your peers as well. You can get the latest best practices, resources, and you can sign up for upcoming events just like this. So this event today was a part of the Live on ServiceNow series, which is an integrated event series to support upgrades, adoption, and deployment of ServiceNow products. And as Adam mentioned, he leads the Platform Academy series, which happens bi-weekly. So we'll have links in the chat for both. I'm going to skip past these key takeaways so we can get to some of your questions. All of the links that we shared today, all the resources we share today will be linked in the chat. All righty. Adam, are there some questions that you want to make sure we answer before we wrap?
I think I got through most of them. I'm putting some more in the Q&A, if anything comes through. As far as next experience, so that is on the roadmap right now to come through. I believe it is not in Vancouver that it will work. It does, in Next Experience, it does work in the Unified Nav. If you turned on Next Experience, it works. All the lists and forms still work. But the configurable workspace doesn't work. So it's part of Next Experience does work. You don't need to be afraid to turn on Next Experience, but the workspaces themselves, that ATF doesn't support those yet. And that was it.
Awesome. Okay. And then we've got some questions on where can I access the recording for this session. We've put a link there in the chat. And after this session is over, you'll also get a link emailed to you.
And I will put in one. There was a question that came in about walk-up experience and ATF tests. So the quick start tests, which you definitely want to be looking at, every app I believe ships with them. So I don't know if it doesn't. Well, we don't cover configure workspaces. We do cover Service Portal to come through. Once you install the app, some of the apps do ship with the ATF tests put inside of them. Other ones, there are additional plugins or additional apps to come through. So make sure that you go into system applications and go look and see if there are ATF tests for whatever app you're going through. And there are 600 or 700, actually going back a couple of releases, there were 600 or 700 quick start tests out of there. Lots and lots of stuff out there that's just waiting for you to take advantage of. So make sure you go look for those plugins, look for those apps that contain the tests for the apps you're already using.
Wonderful. Well, with that, we will wrap. Thank you so much, Adam, and thank you all for joining us today. If you have any other follow-up questions, like I said, you'll get a link after today's session with the recording. There's also an email that you can reach out to, but be sure to check us out on the Upgrade and Releases community. Thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your day.